before I get into the details, I would like to thank all of the members, both of the G4S staff, the Barbados Workers Union, the G4S company and its representatives, and indeed the ministers, particularly the Minister of Labour and the other ministers who have served on this subcommittee, the Minister of Home Affairs, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and indeed the Attorney General of Barbados. I think that we've had a long few days, but like with most things, we have put the national interest first, and we are in a position to report, as I said, that the crisis has been averted and that we have agreed on a number of things that we believe will not only add value to the specific members affected by this crisis, but will come to be regarded as a seminal moment in this country's industrial history. When we reflected on where we were Monday night, there was no doubt that there were strong and definite positions. But like with most matters of this type, our duty is to see where we can find common ground. I'm happy to report that on reflection, we were able to find that common ground, and it is common ground that will benefit not only the workers of G4S, but thousands of workers across Barbados, not only in the area of security, but across a wide range of classes. And what am I referring to specifically? For more than a decade, the Barbados Workers Union, in its conferences year after year after year, would have called for the establishment of a national minimum wage and sectoral minimum wages to protect the most vulnerable in our society, whether it is shop assistants who were already getting it and domestics, to extend to gas station workers, to extend to cleaners, to extend ultimately to agricultural workers, general workers, security workers, officers, guards, watchmen. And I have always been motivated by the rationale which the Barbados Workers Union laid out as I attended their conferences in opposition predominantly and listened very quietly. And I can admit that that is one of the major motivating factors, Sir Roy, that we would have included it in our manifesto, not just simply as an idle promise, but as I've said on many occasions before, one of the reasons why we were able to move with dispatch on the restructuring of our debt and on the stabilization of our economy within 1 week of being sworn in fact less than 1 week of being sworn in as a government, is because we did a lot of heavy lifting while in opposition. And one of the areas on which we had done heavy lifting was on this issue of a national minimum wage. I discovered in the last 24 hours that G4S had also written former Prime Minister, the late David Thompson, to indicate its desire for a national minimum wage for security workers in Barbados because of their own concern with respect to the disparity in fees. We made it clear then, and I don't think it is any secret, and I thank G4S at the very least for their honesty in admitting, without giving us more stress, that the security stewards and the security officers were doing the same job but were receiving different. We took a position that we would not, under any circumstances, agree that that could continue to be the basis for any good employer in this country to operate, and certainly none with whom the government has contractual relations. I'm happy to report that after intensive back and forth and conciliation between the parties, that the parties have agreed that G4S will pay all of the security workers, whether stewards or officers, $8.79 from January 1st as opposed to the old rate of $7.42. But that we all agree that the only sustainable solution for this is not simply their application of the commitment to pay from January 1st that amount. We've agreed as well, and both Sir Roy and Mr. Aline can speak further, that there will be a commitment to a minimum number of hours as guided by the customs and practice and the collective bargaining agreement, but in any event, not less than 40 hours per week. And that collectively, we support the government's efforts to work towards the national minimum wage. Now, some of you may say, what are we talking about? Where does this come from? It hasn't dropped out of the air. Mercifully, because we made a manifesto commitment towards a national minimum wage of actually $8 in the manifesto, my government was able, through the Minister of Labour, to establish and appoint the National Minimum Wage Board pursuant to the legislation that we found, but equally as important, to establish a working committee within the ministry that in fact produced this document, the draft proposal for a national minimum wage for Barbados. And therefore, the 6 months that it took to do the heavy lifting on this document is behind us and not ahead of us. And as a result, what remains to be done is for this to go to the National Minimum Wage Board for its comments, acceptance, amendment, rejection, and then for them to report pursuant to the law to the minister. Upon the advice of the Attorney General, we accept that that process also allows the minister to recommend certain ways for implementing what he receives. And because we are breaking new ground, because in Barbados, it was only shop assistants and domestics whose wages have been regulated, and that has been regulated. The last order would have them earning $6.25, and that is some years now. So, Roy, I can't remember the exact date, but some time, which is why we were motivated to put the figure that we did in the manifesto. As a result, it means that we felt that because this is new ground, that we also wanted as cabinet to have a number of persons who, by dint of their experience in Barbados, the National Minimum Wage Board is a tripartite body, by the way, with 3 members appointed by government, 3 members appointed by the unions, 3 members appointed by the private sector. But we felt that even with that, we wanted a blue ribbon body, a blue ribbon advisory committee to advise the cabinet as to what was being recommended by the National Minimum Wage Board, who would continue to have responsibility for the maintenance and review of minimum wages in Barbados. But you know, when you're starting off on a journey for the first time, or those of you who have children and you're sending them away for the first time, you usually still want somebody else to help take care of them and to look after them and to monitor them and to make sure that everything's good. Well, the government is no different in this one. We believe that this Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee will take the recommendations of the Minimum Wage Board and take the recommendations from this working document, and that we will ask them to consult with the various institutions across the social partnership, but open up also to individuals, individual workers, individual owners, to the public of Barbados generally. And that in doing so, that they report back to the Cabinet of Barbados no later than the 1st of February 2021, at which point The minister then will review their comments, that of the National Minimum Wage Board, that of the Working Committee, and recommend to Cabinet, for Cabinet's agreement, what the national minimum wage would be. One of the things that we recognize is that there can be no single figure across the board, particularly since certain sectors have different complexities and different skill sets. And in fact, that's what's reflected in the draft report as well. So that you may have a national minimum wage that is across the board for shop assistants and domestics, and we include now gas station workers, we include general workers, we include watchmen, we include cleaners. But already, agricultural workers are paid above even what we had put in the manifesto for a national minimum wage. Already, security workers are paid above. And therefore, we accept that, and the legislation that was passed contemplates that there may be different floors, different prices for different sectors depending on the complexity. So that we expect that they will review this, that they will look at the different sectors. We expect that nobody is going to set a minimum wage lower than what people are earning for the most part. And therefore, we look forward to a resolution of this matter that will allow not just G4S workers, not just security workers, but thousands of Barbadian workers to face 2021 with the comfort that come April, that there will be in place in Barbados a national minimum wage as well as sectoral wages, minimum wages for different sectors. This is important because, as I said, the work has already been done. In the normal course of things, the government might not have gotten there until the middle of next year, because I think you all know what 2020 has involved. But it made no sense taking that approach that would normally have taken us there by the middle of next year. And mercifully, all of the parties, and this afternoon I would have also briefed the head of the private sector association before I spoke to you, because it is not our practice to speak to each other through the media, but to indicate that we will bring forward with dispatch that which we might have reached by June, July next year. And in so doing, it allows G4S workers to be a winner, G4S the company, because we are conscious of the conditions against which they were fighting again, as well as the thousands of other workers working in gas stations, working in homes as domestic, working as cleaners, working as agricultural workers, working as sales and shop assistants, and to allow us to go forward with confidence that there must be a floor below which no one is allowed to go in this country. That there must be a minimum amount by which we value dignified labor in Barbados. And we do so conscious that all of us within the last 2 to 3 generations have either come from or have persons still in a position where they are dependent on employers, and where the opportunity to bargain, Sir Roy, is not an even opportunity. Sure. And to that extent, the public space must be defended by saying that there is a limit below which no one shall fall. And that is why I say that today will mark a significant day in the history of this country as the 10th of December 2020. I'm conscious that that Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee needs to comprise of persons who are distinguished in their own right and accomplished in their own right. And I'm happy that we have persons in our community who are prepared to serve at a minute's notice in the national interests. I've asked the former Chief Justice of Barbados, Sir David Simmons, to serve as the chairman of this Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee. And I've also asked the following persons to serve on it, representing, as is our custom, the tripartite nature of the relations in our country. I refer specifically to Mr. John Williams, who is chairman of the Barbados General and Advisory Public Service Commission, Services Commission. I've asked the former founding member of Setu Sab, who has recently been honored by our country, the Most Honorable Mr. Patrick Frost, to also serve. I've asked the former General Secretary of the National Union of Public Workers and Ambassador, Permanent Representative to the United Nations under the last government, Mr. Joseph Goddard, to also serve. I've asked Sir Alan Fields, a former head of the Barbados private sector, to also serve. And I've asked Ms. Marcia Martindale, who has been a business owner in Bridgetown and I believe Sheraton Mall for quite a long time. I don't like to give away a woman's age, so just say for quite a long time, and is an established businesswoman in Barbados. But important because she reflects not big business, but what the challenges are of managing a smaller enterprise, owner-operated enterprise. I think the public of Barbados will agree with me that these persons represent a level of experience and accomplishment and wisdom that will allow us as a cabinet and us as a country to benefit further from their deliberations, from their intervention in seeking further input from the public, and that once they report to us on the 1st of February, and once we set the draft order pursuant to the legislation, the public then has a further period of 40 days within which to state any specific objection that any particular individual or institution might have for the Minister and the National Minimum Wage Board to review and reflect upon before we set it to bed for April. You will see that the government has taken careful consideration of the timelines as well as the task to ensure that what we are seeking to do is attainable and achievable. And I'm happy, as I said, and I thank Minister Jordan for his work, for ensuring that what was simply a manifesto promise has been significantly advanced by the preparation of this report and has allowed me to be able to find common ground with the G4S workers, with the Barbados Workers Union, and with G4S, the company. At this stage, thank you. At this stage, I would like to invite Sir Roy to address the nation on this matter, and to thank him as he comes. The last week in particular has been rough, but many of you may not know that this matter has been going on for 12 years. Sir Roy, thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and good evening to the press. I wish at the very outset to commend the workers of G4S for their capacity to take a matter up and to pursue it with the vigor with which this matter has been pursued for many years now. There were many reasons why we stopped at the very brink over these years, because the effort to reduce the pay level goes back, in fact, to about 2011, where we rejected it, and we've given reasons why that could not have been dealt with. But then it was introduced by the company unilaterally, and every effort was made to take advantage of the economic difficulties which existed in Barbados to keep those stewards, as they were called, at a considerably lesser rate while exploiting the situation to the advantage of the company. So on this occasion, when the workers approached the current General Secretary, they were adamant, and she recognized the seriousness of their intent, and I'm pleased to say that she responded admirably to it. And out of these discussions, we have gone the full distance, involving a former Chief Labor Officer, involving the current acting Chief Labor Officer, trying to get the Minister of Labor to take part in the exercise. And when we realized that the company was still not able to meet our demand, reaching out to the Prime Minister, to whom we are very grateful, with the cabinet members whom you see, we are grateful to them for going a step beyond just trying to prevent a strike at G4S, but trying to use the occasion of the disquiet to correct a number of inadequacies, a number of inequalities which G4S was suffering from, but not G4S alone. All security firms. And we have been asking that we should be in a position to have a level playing field where this is concerned. G4S separately was asking for it, though we did not understand it in the same way. And I'm pleased and honored that some of these same G4S colleagues who were leaders of their colleagues then are still leaders now, and I would like them to give themselves a hearty applause for their stick-to-itiveness. From 2010 or so, we have been asking that the government of the day, would safeguard the most vulnerable that there was in our society, particularly security guards, janitors, service station attendants, shop assistants, domestic workers. We've been able to receive the usual notice that the matter has reached Cabinet, but unfortunately, we have not been able over all these years to make progress. There are some people who would say that we have got the government undertaking to support the Barbados Workers Union at this time, and to find the reasons why that should not be possible and should not be proper. And I recall a couple months ago, yes, in September, that the Barbados Workers Union made it abundantly clear that it saw nothing whatsoever amiss in a set of circumstances where the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union would stand on a political platform with whoever it chose as the party that it wanted to associate with, if in so doing we were able better to represent the interests of the workers of Barbados, especially those who are most vulnerable. There was nothing wrong over all the years, including when I was General Secretary, There can't be anything wrong with it now. And I wish we would all be honest with ourselves and that we do not choose to be selective in the times we choose or the occasions we choose to refer to. The understanding is very clearly that this is an arrangement which has to have at its very root and at its very center a concern for uplifting, especially those who are not able to help themselves. And you would notice from the many resolutions which there have been over time that we have consistently been seeking to treat with those matters. I said in 2010, but also in 2010 we looked for domestic workers. You know, if we were to go back to the law books, the records, we would notice that domestic workers have a rate in the law books, a rate of $150 an hour. Mind you, nobody pays attention to it, I hope. But the reality is that domestic workers did not get the kind of attention they needed to have. And now we are in a position where the ILO itself has put on its books a convention, 189, I'm sorry. Now that we are at that position, we have been arguing across the length and breadth of Barbados that domestic workers had to be treated no less favorably than workers who had larger groups that could organize and can approach employers and fight for themselves. But if you are a single worker, obviously you do not have that protection, and the Barbados Workers Union has been endeavoring over the years to get something happen in this area, and I'm pleased to note that in what has just been said to you by the Prime Minister, domestic workers are not left behind. And we also have been trying to deal with the special conditions of security guards. When the boss has left the place, and other people like the place a little better than the boss himself might, the security guard is left with a baton or a little stick, and he is supposed to protect that place. Rain, fall, sunshine, sometimes no shelter. And we do not recognize the tremendous sacrifice, the tremendous commitment that is made in those areas. And I'm pleased to see that we have been able to allow discussions with the Prime Minister and her cabinet to cause us to reach the stage where we have given up a demand for back pay. Workers given up a demand for back pay. Now, that is not normally what the trade union is about. But we have decided to make that sacrifice because we have said to the Prime Minister and to G4S that we want not just G4S workers to come out ahead of this in circumstances where they can take home a living wage to their families. We want all security workers to have that particular benefit. It's been a long struggle, and there are others for whom that struggle has to be continued and has to be pursued. And I'm hopeful that those of you who believe that all you need to do is to receive the benefit, that you understand that your unity, your togetherness, your solidarity is very critical if we are going to be able to lift the hand of the government, and if we are going to have the opportunity to make sure that these benefits which we are looking forward to are benefits which are received now and which are built upon for the future, and that other similar workers will understand the advantage of using their collective power to the greater advantage of all the working people of this country of Barbados. I salute G4S workers. I salute all security workers across the island.
Thank you very much, Sir Roy. And at this stage, I'd like to invite the company's representative in Barbados, its legal advisor of recent vintage and toll, Mr. Ramon Aline, to speak on behalf of G4S. Thank you.
Good night, and thank you, Prime Minister. It is ironic that the industry leader in the security market in Barbados, the one who pays the best salaries bar none, is the one who has found itself in this position and dealing with a substantive issue related to the rights of workers, not only its workforce, but the workforce across the security sector. And as the Prime Minister has indicated, by extension, a number of sectors where we may consider vulnerable workers exist day to day. I want to thank the Prime Minister, and the company G4S wants to thank the Prime Minister for the efforts she has made in bringing a resolution to this matter. She has offered human service and advice in the matter, and the company is minded that it should stand by the principles of a company that has existed over 40 years in this market, providing essential services across the land. The reality is that, as the Prime Minister indicated, since 2009, G4S wrote the powers asking that a minimum wage be introduced, because it recognized not only would it accrue to the benefit of its workers and the workers of the security sector, but it would set a standard which would allow a level playing field going forward in terms of the security market. And the reality is that since that year, in spite of the fact that it has never been actioned, G4S committed and kept that industry leading aspect in terms of its reward of its workers. This crisis has offered an opportunity, and with the Prime Minister's leadership, there is a solution which speaks not just to G4S, but speaks to a wider community that is in need. We wish to thank the Workers' Union, the Barbados Workers' Union, Secretary General Ms. Moore and Sir Roy, because it has been a collaborative effort. We have spoken to the need to build the trust element that exists, or the lack of that may exist between the parties, and I believe this is a good first step. There's a commitment going forward in terms of a monitoring committee, which was agreed tonight in relation to ensuring that that level of trust grows and that the promises that have been made are kept. The reality is this could not have been possible without the Prime Minister's leadership in terms of putting forward a minimum wage that will speak to sectoral discrepancies, speak to discrepancies across the land for many workers. And again, we must thank her for the effort she has made in this. At the end of the day, we recognize that our partners at the union are an essential part of what we do and what we offer to our many clients. And it is only in terms of working collaboratively that we can make this work. G4S is heartened to continue its industry-leading ways, and I wish to thank the Barbados Workers Union and the Prime Minister for her efforts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aline. Let me say a few things before I open up to any questions. One, that we also recognize that there are some pieces of legislation that will need urgent review. I spoke the other night of the 1952 Labor Clauses Public Contracts Act that specifically incorporates certain conventions of the International Labour Organization into our laws. That was passed in 1952. Barbados has had 2 premiers and 8 prime ministers since then, me being the 8th. We think the time has come to bring it up to date and to specifically incorporate other conventions that may be relevant to our circumstances in Barbados, and I think Sir Roy pointed out to some of them earlier. May I say at this stage as well that while we acknowledge the judgment of the highest court of the land, the Caribbean Court of Justice, that many of those treaties are incorporated by implication into our laws, we feel that we have a specific obligation for absolute clarity for workers for employers, for persons looking on, academics, everyone, for the court for there to be no doubt as to what our intention is. We hope, therefore, that the Blue Ribbon Committee will not only just look at the matter of the national minimum wage, but it will also look at any other critical matters that they believe to be necessary to allow a national minimum wage to be successfully implemented in this country, and any other conventions that we need to be cognizant of at this stage that ought to be specifically incorporated into our laws. I also want to thank, as I said, all who have listened. Let it be clear that we don't always get to where we want to go in one go, but we have to keep going and to keep focused. And when I say stay focused, that is what I mean. I believe that this country will be better served by the establishment of this minimum wage, by the creation of the floor below which no one shall fall. But I'm also conscious that we are living in very difficult times, and we have taken the position that there can be no arithmetical equation to avoid the right thing. We have to do right where justice merits it and demands it. And this was what happened in this case. I want to thank G4S, as I said, for recognizing that, but I want to thank the Barbados Workers Union and the G4S workers for not losing faith and for fighting for more than 10 years, I'm told 12 years, on this particular matter. We are conscious that persons will wonder certain things. This is not a signal for open season on wage increases. It isn't a wage increase. It is the correction of an anomaly. It is the correction of an unfair situation. It is the correction of an unjust situation. As it relates to other matters pertaining to wages and prices, the government has already signaled its intention, and indeed at the last social partnership, we agreed to the establishment of a committee that will report to us early in the new year, conscious that as a small open economy, much of the prices that we do have, yes, are imported, but those over which we have control, we all agree as a nation to moderate. These workers have moderated by abandoning the claim for back pay for something that we all know was wrong. This country owes you a debt of gratitude for doing that. But they have done that confident and conscious that their courage has now opened the door for thousands of Barbadian workers to be treated fairly and to ensure that they can meet their needs by having access effectively to a livable minimum wage. And with that, I therefore want to thank persons, and we look forward to the reporting of the various parties, the National Minimum Wage Board, the Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee, and ultimately the settlement and recommendations, the recommendations by the Minister of Labour, but the settlement by Cabinet, such that by April we can start both government's new fiscal year, as well as generally some companies too, with the confidence that we have done right by our people, and that increased purchasing power in the economy will also benefit persons who are not directly at the center of this decision today, because as people earn more, they're in a position to meet their needs and to spend more. And I keep making the point that 2/3 of our revenue in this country in any event comes from transactional taxes, and that depends on how people are spending and moving in the economy. With those few words, I thank you and open the floor to any few questions, if there are any. Right?
Related to...
You may have to speak loudly because you realize that we're going so you can hear.
Well, I have one related to industrial relations. Obviously, this is one fire that we've been able to quell. Obviously, we also have some issues in the hotel sector. I know I heard the minister speak to hoteliers recently. Are you satisfied that you're making some progress in terms of addressing the issues that are coming up in the tourism sector right now?
I think we are. And you would have noticed that the Minister of Tourism has been working very hard, meeting with hotel workers. I think that this Minister of Tourism has probably met with more hotel workers than any previous Minister of Tourism, certainly in recent memory. And one of the things we realized is that communication is absolutely critical, and that in many instances there was not sufficient clear communication between employers and workers. The government made it very clear from the outset that rather than placing money in the national insurance scheme to pay out again as unemployment benefit, we would not even be paying the workers sufficiently. But secondly, we would be ignoring the fact that hotels, when closed up, and every Bajan knows this, you lock up a house for 2-3 months and see what happens to the tiles. The tiles blow, because most places got ceramic tiles. You don't turn on a tap, or you don't flush a toilet for long. What happens to it? The plumbing goes, the yellow marks come. Next thing you know, you got to change out all of the bathroom fittings in order to be able to rent it out as a room in a hotel. So what we faced was the potential degradation of our capital stock, our hotels. The hotels would start to look dilapidated. And we made a determination that we needed a win-win for the sector. There's not everybody who is happy, but in this 2020, there isn't everybody who is happy on everything. But we have to govern. And what we have seen is that almost 30 hotels have come on board. As a result of that, the government is very clear that we are not going to engage hotels in seeking to prey on the severance payments fund when we feel that we have placed a fund of $150 million there for hoteliers to be able to, either through preference shares, or some have made the case now for loan financing, to be able to assist the hotels. We get it that they have no cash flow, but we equally get it that without the workers, the hotels can't offer anything. And we are adamant. We're not called a Labour Party, or the opposition parties aren't called Labour parties by accident, because this country has been built on the backs of workers. And this country continues also to view workers as critical to its success, as much as persons will use savings and investment as another critical component. Against that backdrop, therefore, we were very clear to send the message, and I'm happy to report that the people at Divi in, what's it called? The one in Whole Town, that was the first one. The club. That the owners of the club have indicated that they will not be asking National Insurance to pay out the severance, that they will pay out the severance to the workers as was originally promised. We are working, I believe that those at Savannah and the Ministry of Tourism, that they've been meeting, and I hope that Mr. Weatherhead speaks to the country, if he's not already done so today, but he needs to speak to the country and the workers and to contextualize his position. In fairness, his position at Savannah became entangled with the offer to purchase as a result of a request for proposals, and therefore between the banks, Hotels and Resorts Limited, and Mr. Weatherhead and the workers, that became entangled. I believe that there is a way out and that they know what it is, but sufficient to say that those workers who have already received their severance from him have had, and those who are there, the majority of them I think are being taken back, and those who will not will have their severance paid by him. There is one establishment that is still given some issues. They've agreed that they will pay the severance. They want to pay it over a long period of time. The government is not in that. We're not in that. And we're very clear. If you can find money to do certain things, you can find money to do this too. And it is as simple as that. And we are clear. The AG and I spoke today with Cabinet about also the other clauses that may need strengthening in the National Insurance Act to ensure that we don't have this kind of cavalier attitude. The Act already provides for penalties, for example, where directors do not appropriately pay over the contributions deducted. We may have to look at other ways of strengthening that as well to ensure that people do not offer different types of excuses for not doing what is right by the workers of this country. This government has been very clear. Look, Barbados has almost 300,000 people living here. The majority of them are workers. And we would have to be mad or crazy not to live with each other well. We have to accept that on 166 square miles, there must be room for workers to have dignified labor and to be appropriately treated. Equally, there's a responsibility for them to give of their service and to do what they promise to do in the job that they accept. Similarly, we have persons who invest, and they are large investors, but they're also small investors who collectively become large through the credit unions and through other financial instruments that we have in our system. We value all, and that is why the government has continued, and successive governments have continued to value the social partnership in this country, because while the unions represent the workers and the owners of capital represent the money, either their own money or other monies that they are collectively using through pension funds or credit unions or whatever, the government's duty is to protect fairness in the public space, and we will never retreat from that duty. Any other questions? If none, I want to thank everybody. I really hope that, and as I close, I want to say this. 2020 has not been an easy year. It has tested every sinew in our body. It has tested our commitment. It has tested our principles. It has tested our own ability to live in ways that we understand. I want to salute the people of Barbados again, because I keep making the point that this country could be a very different country if we did not have people who understood their responsibility. These workers today have exhibited a level of sacrifice, courage, and commitment to the national cause that I really have to salute you publicly and ask the people of Barbados to join me in saluting you. By the same token, the people in Barbados across, as we face this pandemic, have really risen to the occasion in every sector, from the media to the private sector, to the workers, to the NGOs and churches, because churches, as you know, were dislocated for at least 2 months in the middle of the pandemic. But in all that we have done, we've kept the national interest first. There are some people who are beginning to believe that there's another interest to watch. I want the rest of Barbados to join me and to remind the country, as these Barbadians have reminded us today, the national interest is what will take us through on 166 square miles. Everything that we want, we cannot always get. There are a lot of things that this government would like that are not immediately available to it. There are a lot of things that other workers would like that may not be available to us at this point in time. There are things that some of the investors would like and companies that are not available to them at this time. I ask us only, please, to recognize that we are the inheritors of a proud legacy. It is up to us to moderate. Remember, there's an old saying sometimes that works, especially when you're in trouble. To moderate and to allow us to stay focused, knowing full well that even though there may be some clouds over the country and over the world for that matter, that the sun will come out tomorrow again. And once we stay the course, and once we keep our nose above water, even if not our mouth, then I have every confidence that this country will not only do well, but will become that beacon for others to follow. Thank you, Merry Christmas, and God bless you.